Hello, welcome to the wrap up. I'm gonna talk about the books that I read this month. I read 16 books. I have my collection of physical books here. I did read quite a few on my Kindle and I read one audiobook. I thought I'd start with the physical books and just get them out the way because then I don't have to hold up anything anymore, which is obviously my main goal in life, to be able to be hands-free at all times. These first books are all in reading vlogs, these first 7 books. So if you want more in-depth reviews of them, go watch those vlogs. Let's start with The Dead Romantics. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed the whole thing. There were very few aspects that I was like, nah, not for me. I had a great time with the characters. I felt like it was really heartwarming and really touching. There was a lot of actual comedy in it, which was really nice. So you had that kind of duality of funny and heartwarming at the same time. So I really enjoyed it. Brief summary: Florence is a ghost writer and she's late for the book that she's supposed to be writing. What are you doing? She has to go home to her family because of something that happens within her family, and when she's there she meets and falls in love with a ghost. It was really sweet, it was really funny, I had a really good time. I definitely want to read more from Ashley Poston. Much enjoyed. Also in that vlog I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I struggled with this. I had a really hard time reading this book. I don't think it's a bad book, but it just really struggled to hold my attention. In this book, it's set in Yale. There are all these different kind of magical secret societies, and the main character, Alex, is part of the Ninth House, the Ninth Secret Society, that looks after these 8 secret societies and makes sure they don't overstep themselves or do anything too dangerous for the people around them. It's a kind of murder, mystery, fantasy, dark academia thing, mishmash of stuff. The only character that I cared about was Darlington, and he's missing. So not a strong book for me. I did give it 3 stars. I think it was fine, but it just wasn't everything I want it to be. I do struggle with things like gothic atmosphere. That's not something that I kind of notice in books. Like, I'll read books that people say are really atmospheric and I just don't notice the atmosphere. So this didn't do it for me. The other book I read in that video was Alone with You in the Ether. This was beautiful. This was such a good character exploration. It is a romance, but it's not only a romance. There's so much to do with mental health, there's so much to do with art and creativity, there's so much to do with finding yourself both within a relationship and outside a relationship. I think it's this really like touching exploration of their relationship, and watching them kind of blossom by knowing each other is really lovely. And I think it handled some delicate themes very well. Really enjoyed this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. I had a great time with it. Would recommend. The next vlog I did was reading romance authors for the first time. So one of the romance authors I'd never read before was Mariana Zapata, and I read All Roads Lead Here. This is the slowest slow burn I have ever read. And I had someone say, like, if you read a slow burn then you want it to really burn when it does. And I feel like that's what this lacked a little bit. It just wasn't quite as passionate once the slow burn started burning, that it kind of made up for how slow it was to begin with. This is about Aurora. She has had a change in her personal circumstances and has gone to live in her childhood town, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this is a love story between her and her landlord when she gets there. I think the 2 main characters were really great. I think they both had a lot of good qualities about them, but what I wanted out of this was a bit more of a found family, and I didn't quite get that. There are other characters that do play a role in it, but I don't think they are quite as important to the story as I hoped they would be. I really liked it. Slow burn was just a little bit too slow, and it wasn't quite as burny. It wasn't as burny as I wanted it to be. So I think I gave this 3.75. I almost loved this book. I almost loved it. I just didn't quite. In that same vlog, I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is straight up rom-com. So you have Hannah, who is a personal bodyguard, and Jack, who is a celebrity, and she gets hired as his bodyguard, and he wants to keep any troubling news away from his family, so she agrees to pose as his girlfriend. So it's got this kind of fake dating theme. It was funny. I liked the little bit of insanity that happened at the end. That was fun. I liked their relationship. I think I found Hannah just a little bit too self-deprecating for me, and I don't remember having any like real laugh out loud moments with this, so I don't think it's gonna stick with me that much. I gave it 3.5. I just felt like there wasn't anything to make this stand out from other romances that I read, but I had a good time. I did have a good time. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't anything super special for me. I also read Happy Place by Emily Henry, my first Emily Henry book. I don't even know how to describe this book. This is about Wes and Harriet, who were in a relationship. They broke up and they don't tell their friends. Then they go on holiday with their friends, and in order to keep the happy nature of the group, they decide to pretend they're still together. This book to me was heartbreaking. If you want to know why I thought it was heartbreaking, go watch the vlog. But this was just such an emotional book for me. I think the relationship was done really well. I think the self-examination of the characters was done really well. I really liked the writing style. I really liked the kind of friendship aspects of this book. It really explores things like how you change as you grow up and how you maintain friendships when your lives become so different. Like, it really explores a bunch of different things that I think was done really well. I gave this 4.5. It was so good, and I'm so excited to read more of Emily Henry. The final book I read for that vlog was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. Loved it. I gave it 4 stars. The main character, Taylor, goes on a vacation and finds a dead body, and then Miles, a bounty hunter, gets roped up in trying to solve the murder. It was so fun. It was such a fun book. I really enjoyed the characters. It was like just the right amount of spice. I loved the kind of mystery aspects of it, the slightly thrillery nature of it. It was just a really good time. There isn't much substance to it, right? Like, it's not a great work of literary fiction, but that does not lessen my enjoyment of it in any way. I had such a good time reading it, and I'm so glad that I found it. I would definitely recommend it if you like that kind of mix of romance and thriller. Like, I think it's that really good balance of just such a fun time, but also completely insane. And I really loved that mix. I'm just going to do the last 2 books I read physically. I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is a book about Brianna and Jacob. Brianna and Jacob both work in the ER at a hospital. Brianna has been there for a while and Jacob is brand new, and they get off on very much the wrong foot. They do not make a good first impression with each other. Brianna is going through a hard time. Her brother is waiting for a kidney transplant, is not doing well with his illness, and is on dialysis. She's also just about to finalize her divorce. Her best friend, who's the main character in the first book in this series, has just moved away, and so she is really struggling with life. Jacob is a high anxiety bean. He has a lot of anxiety about everything, mainly about social situations, and so when he's confronted by this kind of brash, beautiful doctor, who is Brianna, he gets really tongue-tied and says the wrong things and is a bit of a klutz with his words. In order to apologise for that, he writes her a letter, and she writes him a letter, and he writes her a letter, and it's all very cute. They end up fake dating in this book, which is fun, and to make things slightly more complicated, it turns out Jacob is a perfect donation match for Brianna's brother. So that's like a little bit of added weight on the situation. I love Jacob. Jacob might be one of the top men I have ever read in a romance book. He is so sweet and so caring, and he is like the epitome of like show loving gestures. Like, he absolutely 100% continuously shows her that he's in love with her, and I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. He did everything just to see her smile, and it was such golden retriever energy, right? Like, absolutely the sweetest boy in the world. The only thing I didn't like about this book was that, I mean, it's called Yours Truly, like it's about the letters, like the cover is about the letters, the title is about the letters, and the letters only took up like 50 pages. I was really looking forward to seeing maybe something a bit like Divine Rivals where they fall in love through the letters, but really it's just like the very beginning of their relationship is through the letters. So I think that let me down a little bit, and I felt like the kind of third act conflict was introduced and resolved very quickly. It was devastating, but it was quite a quick turnaround. Bam, it happened, and then bam, it was over. I think those are the only things that I didn't love about this. I gave it 4 stars. Did I say that? I was about to throw it away, and I'm not even sure if I told you my rating. I gave it 4 stars. Huzzah. Final physical book, Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I got 4 pages into this book, and I was like, love it. Love it, love it, love it. I love the writing, I love the comedy, I love it. And so I started tabbing it, which is unusual for me, which is why there's so few, because I never do it. But I really liked the writing in this. I underlined a lot more than I tabbed, but I just wanted to tab my absolute favourite bits. This is about Lillian and her friend Madison. They went to school together and then they didn't see each other again, but they kept up a kind of pen pal relationship, and Madison asks Lillian to come and visit her because she has a job opportunity for her, and it turns out that job opportunity is to be a nanny or a governess for her stepkids. Been through a lot and burst into flames. They burst into flames when they get agitated or upset or have any kind of high emotion. So she wants Lillian to come and manage that so that her husband can continue with his political aspirations. I really liked the writing of this. The humour of this was just like absolutely spot on for me. I just loved the book before the kids came into the picture, and I know the kids are kind of the whole point, like this relationship between them and Lillian is really important, and the relationships that they've been through in the past and the ways they respond to things is really important, and their fear, their trauma is kind of devastating to hear about. But to me it felt like the humour kind of slightly fell off after their first meeting. I don't think it was as funny from that point on, and it became just a smidge boring, for me. I didn't love kind of the second half of the book, I would say. Loved the first half, didn't love the second half. I gave this 3.75. It's just another one of those books which I wanted to love it. From the first kind of half of it, I really wanted to love it, but the second half just kind of wasn't my cup of tea, let me down just a little bit, and so I gave this 3.75. That's all the physical books done and dusted. So I think I have to refer to my phone for this, but I think I want to talk about the rest of the books just in the order that I finished them. So the first one I finished was Leather and Lark. I listened to the audiobook for this and I didn't like it. It's the sequel to Butcher and Blackbird. I gave Butcher and Blackbird 3 stars. I thought it was fine. For me, Butcher and Blackbird both wasn't funny enough and wasn't gory enough. So I was hoping that maybe like in the sequel they'd kind of up their game and it would be funnier and gorier, but it was neither. The book is about Lark, who is a music singer, like there's any other kind of singer, who is a musician, and Lachlan, who is a professional criminal, we'll say. Lark is also secretly a serial killer. They enter into a marriage of convenience to protect their loved ones, and they slowly fall in love. I didn't care. I didn't care about the characters at all. I didn't think it was that funny for a book about a criminal and a serial killer. There was like killing at the beginning and killing at the end and nothing in the middle. I just didn't like it. I gave it 2.75. I gave it 2.75 because there was nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't for me. Actually, there was one thing wrong with it. The epilogue. No one needed that epilogue. I'm an epilogue lover. I love an epilogue. No one needed that epilogue. Maybe some people needed that epilogue, but the epilogue, not for me. Absolutely not for me. Just completely unnecessary. Could have been worked in earlier on. If you wanted to include that, include it in the story. Why did you have to have an epilogue just for that? Not my jam. not my jam. Next, I read Lights Out by Navessa Allen, and it was everything that Leather and Lark was not. It was great. It was dark, it was twisty, it was funny, absolutely hilarious, loved it. And there was such good, morally grey characters within it that I absolutely loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It's about Ali, who engages with a specific TikTok account belonging to Josh. Josh discovers that she likes his stuff, and so he stalks her, and hilarity ensues. It's dark, don't get me wrong, it is dark. The characters are enjoying themselves, but it is a dark book. If you liked Butcher and Blackbird and you liked Haunting Adeline, if you want something right bang in the middle of those 2 books, you get Lights Out. Dream of a book, dream of a book. Fast paced, high action, very thrilling, just dark enough to get you weird looks if you read it. I had a great time reading it. I ate it up, absolutely loved it. Next I read Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue. This is another dark romance where college student Ray gets her hands on a grimoire and accidentally summons a demon called Leon. For me, this book was just like fine. It was a bit nuts, it was a bit insane. I didn't love either of the main characters, which I think is a big kind of minus point for me, but I did enjoy the storyline overall. I gave it 3.25. I don't know what it could have done differently for me to up my rating. I just don't think it was a story that I loved. It's very supernatural, there's kind of cult stuff in it, there's murder, there's mystery, but Leon was just this very like gruff, standoffish man, and Ray was this kind of wallflower of a girl who didn't, in my opinion, have very much of a personality. So I didn't connect with either of them. I think that's where it really struggled for me, but it was good enough. Yeah, 3.25. Next up I read Death's Obsession by Venus and Graves. I thought it was fine. I think you're gonna struggle to create a meaningful romance in a novella. For me, I'm gonna struggle to find meaningful romance in a novella. There have been a couple that I've read that have been great, but most of the time I don't love them. I love long books. I love books 500 pages plus, and this one just didn't really do it for me. It was a fine book. It's about a girl called Lilith who had a bad accident and essentially died, but death saw her soul and refused to take her, and then became obsessed with her. This book is a lot about grief, it's a lot about depression, it handles some heavy topics, it's about really struggling with your life and but what happens when you're struggling with those things, what happens to the way you perceive the world and that kind of stuff. It was pretty spicy. I just didn't love it. I didn't feel the love between the characters. It's in the title, right? Like, to me it was much more of an obsession. They were obsessed with each other rather than finding meaningful connections to each other. They were just like, oh my god, this person, I need this person, or Grim Reaper, or whatever it is. I need this entity in my life and I need them. I can't survive without them, rather than having any kind of meaningful emotional connections or heartfelt connections. It just felt a little surface level to me. Again, I don't think it's a bad book. I just think it wasn't super right for me. It only got a few more to go. Breathe with me. Now we're getting into the slightly spookier books that I read this month. So next up I read I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. This is about Tolly, who is allergic to peanuts. Due to this peanut allergy and a few other poorly timed situations, he becomes a teenage slasher. I liked this book. I think that might be a controversial opinion. I gave it 3.75. I nearly loved this book. I had a great time with it. I really enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoyed the kind of friendship within the book. I really enjoyed a lot of things about it, but it wasn't quite shocking enough for me. Like, if you took out the gore, this wouldn't be a horror. this wouldn't be a horror book, this would be a literary fiction book. It just so happens to have a bunch of gore in it. That's how I kind of feel about it. Like, it could have been something quite different, but I think I'm quite desensitized to gore. It takes a lot of gore for something to be shocking for me, so maybe I'm just expecting too much, and maybe to other people this would be horrific. I then read another horror, this one sci-fi. I read Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes, and I rated it 5 stars, people. I rated it 5 stars. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So you follow the main character, Claire, who is the team leader on a little salvage ship in space. This is a spaceship. They pick up a distress signal right at the far reaches kind of the known universe, and they go and they find a luxury cruise liner type deal that has been missing for 20 years. And they decide to go on board the cruise liner to figure out what happened, to find out if there are any survivors, to have a little nosy, to pick things up for themselves. And what they find on the ship is pretty deeply disturbing. I loved it. I had such a great time. It was spooky, it was weird. You couldn't trust any of the kind of perspective that you were seeing. You couldn't trust anything that the characters were seeing. You had no idea what happened, and neither did they, so you were kind of discovering it at the same time. I had a really great time with this book. Loved the pacing. There's quite a big like shift in narrative about halfway through the book that takes you from one location to another, and it's a really big difference in the book itself, which I actually really enjoyed. My only gripe with it is that there is a part of the storyline that isn't resolved. Like, there's a part of the story that you don't know how or why it happens, and I would have loved for that to have been included. I think that would have been really interesting, but it probably would have made the book like 100 pages longer, so maybe there just wasn't space for it, I don't know. But I just had such a great time with it. I really enjoyed it. Being kind of somewhat new to sci-fi, it was really digestible. It was a really good time. It wasn't too difficult to understand. It was great. It was, yes! It was amazing. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. My final book of the month was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. It's a thriller, and the basic premise is that Emma writes a 1-star review for a book, and the author is unhappy about that, and then chaos ensues. This was a bit of an insane book, I think. It's wild. It's nuts. It's cray-cray. It's very much unhinged. Completely insane. I don't know how else to describe it. I keep using the same words, but it was just nuts. I don't think of anything that I can think of that was specifically wrong with it. I think Emma was a really interesting character. I think there were kind of interesting side characters. I didn't see some of the twists coming, because there is twist after twist after twist in this book. Some of them you see coming, some of them you don't, but there are enough of them that it doesn't matter, because even if you guess one, there's 5 more for you to not guess. I had a good time reading it, but I just didn't feel drawn into it. I didn't feel like it was super atmospheric. I didn't feel like it had like a really high low of tension that I was kind of looking for in it, I think. It's essentially a home invasion story, which, terrifying to me, one of my worst nightmares come true. So I really wanted to be like on the edge of my seat, absolutely terrified, and I just didn't get that from it, so I gave it 3.25. Yeah, so I just wanted it to be scarier than it was, and I think it was just a little bit too silly to be scary. That's it. That's all the books I read. That took bloody forever. Remind me to read less books next month. I had a really fun reading month. I had a really good time. Like I said, if you wanted to hear more about some of my opinions of the books, there are reading vlogs up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting through my ramblings. If you want to do the usual YouTube things like comment, subscribe, that'd be grand. If not, I get it. I will see you in the next video.
you.